Welcome to the Mischief. I'm Valen. This is Embers. Today, we're going to be going underground and covering natural energy, part 1 of 2. For those unfamiliar with Embers, it is a magic/tech mod. It's mostly tech, but like an ancient style. There's a lot to offer in this mod, and it shouldn't be overlooked, though it will also have kind of a magic-y feel to it, in a way. So let's get started. The first thing that you may experience in the world that currently has embers may be some of its denizens, and there aren't too many of them, but you may find them nonetheless. Now in here I have, an ancient golem. Now the ancient golem is, well, not the friendliest characters. He is immune to knockback, he has a lot of health, and he also has a ranged attack. And, well, a lot of health. Did I mention he's got a lot of health? Especially if you're running into him and you're just punching wood. But it's most important that you get some of the drops from what he will leave behind. Let me put this back here. And that is an ancient motive core. Now, an ancient motive core can be used with a couple of those archaic bricks that the ancient golem also dropped to make yourself an ancient codex, which is going to be a very good generic little guide to get you into Embers. It's really cool looking. It also has a lot of options on here. But we're going to be covering, as I mentioned earlier, natural energy. And we're going to be covering everything in here except for the Ember Activator and the Pressure Refinery. That's going to be pretty much the next part. But as we mentioned before, the ancient constructs, which you may have run into, will drop these. So that is number 1, checked and done. Number 2 is going to be the ores. So if you look over here, I currently have an example of some of them. We've got silver, we've got lead, we've got copper. You'll find those throughout your world, as well as quartz ore. Normally, you would find this in the nether, but now you can find it in the overworld, though you will get much less yield from it. You'll probably only get like 1 piece of quartz from it. And of course, you can always smelt each of these into their respective ingots, and with specific tools turn them into plates, as well as turn them into their block form, and each one will actually have a use in here. Of course, you get your quartz blocks as well. Now, moving on with that, we're going to have something a little bit more interesting, and that's going to be the Tinker Hammer, which is going to be a very useful tool. It is not just to be overlooked in this case. I mean, I've got one here on the pedestal. It is not really going to interact with too much in the world at this point. You will need it to interact with some machinery later on, as well as you can use it to make plates. Now, plates, if you look in here, I've got some down here. In order to use your Tinker Hammer, there we go, you'll just need some iron, lead, and some sticks. It's a really basic recipe, but it also has a use, and that would be if you take some other of the metal ores together, you can usually make some plates with it in a similar fashion, depending on the different styles that you have. Now, those plates will be used to make other machines and such later on. Next up, we get into a little bit more of a building material, and that's going to be Kaolinite. Now, if you come over here, if we look up, we've got Kaolinite down there. And actually, I should show you, if you click on here, it gives you a brief description of what each one will do or how they're used, which, like I said, can be a very good generic guide. But Kaolinite is, well, let me look it up here. We've got Kaolinite Blend, which is just 4 clay balls plus some sort of sand will get you 4 Kaolinite Blend. And then each of those Kaolinites Kaolinite Blend can be used to make a Kaolinite brick, which of course is just a bit of Kaolinite put in a furnace, and it will turn into a brick. Or you can, take 4 of those together in a crafting grid, here, let me show you, to make a raw Kaolinite plate. And then you can also smelt those, which of course, once again, building materials. You can always use the bricks to make walls, slabs, your blocks, plus your stairs. As you see here, it's a similar pattern. But you'll also need those for making some of your machinery later on. It's kind of the base of things. So I recommend you harvest a lot of clay and sand, mostly clay, because you'll need 4 to 1 for each of the pieces of sand in order to make a lot of these. And you'll just need a lot of those, as well as a lot of your ores and materials. Moving on, we're going to have the fluid vessel. Now, it seems like I've kind of jumped in here, but you'll understand why in a moment. Now, the fluid vessel is a very simply made device. As such, it is just some Kaolinite bricks. Now you're seeing iron plates and some iron ingots. So I've kind of taken you how you can progress to making some of these items. Iron tanks fluid vessels are very, very useful. With these, you can actually pick them up. I have a multi-tool here that acts like a pick. If I break it, I can pick it up, and it will retain its fluid. As you can see here, it currently has, on the top left there, 16 buckets of water inside of it. And it can be very useful. You can also store things like lava or other fluids. Temperature doesn't really make a difference for the fluid vessels. They're very durable. Next up, we're going to be covering the dials or gauges, which are in here, right there. And each of those, if you look here, I've got one that popped off of this. Click on here and it tells you how much is inside. So if you don't have some kind of item like the one probe that I'm currently using in the top left corner there, then you'll have the option here to see what's going on inside. And there are two kinds. There is a Ember Gauge and a Fluid Gauge. Now, Ember Gauges are more for a fuel later on. Ember is a style of fuel or power source in this mod and is extremely important. Otherwise, the Fluid Gauge will just tell you how much there is of the fluid for the container that it is attached to, which there are multiple different kinds of containers. This is just one. Next up, we're going with pipes, which is going to be very important for moving things, specifically fluids, as well as items. Now, there are, of course, some different kinds of items and pipes. I'm not covering all the recipes on these. I recommend you get a JEI style interface so that you can actually see the how to make some of these items, but I'm doing them in a way, so I'm presenting them to you in a way so that you can actually craft them as you are discovering them and learning them. Now, there is a mechanical pump and there are iron pipes. These will actually only take care of fluid, if that's any representation. And they are the same color as the fluid vessel, if that helps as well, and the fluid gauge. Now, if you go into item pipes and item pumps, they actually have the word item in the name. And they're slightly purple. So therefore, you should be able to tell the difference, because when you look at them in this view here, it's very difficult to tell. But just remember, item pipes and item pumps both have the name item in them, and the liquid ones do not. So that's the easiest way to do it. And almost everything in this mod requires a lever for it to actually function. So once you place down an item pump, next to an inventory, and you give it a redstone signal, it will actually transfer things out from that inventory. Now, if you just put a lever on an item pipe, nothing's going to happen. The pump will need the redstone signal, and any inventory that it is connected to, it should try to pull from. Now, there may be some circumstances in that, but I recommend you only have it attached to one inventory at a time, or else you'll start getting some really strange results. Now, in here you can see I've got 27 gold ingots kind of spread out on the chest. If I hit the button, they all get taken out, and they all go up to the top chest. Pretty quick, really easy, and pretty basic. You turn it back off, nothing happens. But you would have to, in order to transfer this back down here, either break and replace this pipe in reverse order so that the pump is at the top connected to this one, or you could put another one next to it and go around down to this one, basically making kind of a circular pattern. So that is how you would be using your item pipes and item pumps to transfer. And of course, the fluid ones work in a similar manner. Now, if I go up here, you can see that there's nothing in this fluid vessel currently. It also says that it is empty and there's no reading on the fluid gauge. If I flick this lever, you can see that the water is draining down and it is filling up in this vessel up at the top. And you can actually see that there is a representation of it filling here. So that's pretty basic. Nothing really, fantastic with that, but that is some of the basic principles for pipes. Next up with our ancient codex, we're going to be covering the Atmospheric Gage. And this is going to kind of not really be too useful right now, but it can be useful later on. Now you see here, I picked this guy up here. Actually, allow me to show you briefly. It's made very simply with just some copper, redstone, and iron. And you can see that it currently has a gauge that shows how much ember is in the local area. Now, the thing is, this gauge is going to change over time. So if you feel that you should be harvesting some ember with some of your machines and it's not showing, you might want to grab this little gauge here and, the atmospheric gauge here, and take a look to see if it's currently having a low spot, because the ember underneath the bedrock kind of ebbs and flows, so therefore you'll have some high tides and you'll have some low tides of the quantities for those. To give an example, I'm actually going to head outside and show you guys as I fly around over a few of the different chunks. So you can see here I have my Ember Gauge, and I'm just going to start flying in a diagonal direction. You can see that the gauge is starting to drop as I'm heading over this way. Let's start heading up the hill, and you can see it's going back up again. And as I swing around it's just getting more and more. And it tends to, the higher up the ground is, in the past has proven that there's been a lot of ember, but that's not necessarily the case anymore. Currently, it's just going to be something that is going to kind of be high or low, and it will continue varying over time. Right now, I just have a very low spot with where I've decided to harvest. Now we really get into something more interesting. With this, we're going to get into the Ember Borer, and it requires a few things and has some extra options on it that you don't necessarily have to use. So, an Ember Borer. Recipe for this one is rather, a few-step process. First and foremost, you'll need Kaolinite brick stairs, copper, and some iron, plus a mechanical core, which has multiple uses but is also part of this recipe. Mechanical core is just some iron and lead, plus a compass in there. Nothing really too fancy, but I'm going to put this in here. Actually, let's get rid of some of this other junk that I've got there. I don't need those. And I'm going to place it down on this block. Ember borers are intended to be used very low in the world. Specifically, you'll want to have them at around like Y level 10 or lower. And if you're unfamiliar with how to find that, usually with F3, you can see your coordinates in the world with your X, Y, Z, and you're going to want your Y level to be around 10 or lower when you place your Ember Borer. Now, I'm going to place it up here just so you can see it's got some really large square wheels, which usually wheels are round, but in this case they're square because it's going to be grinding on the bedrock to obtain ember crystals and ember shards for you that you will be able to refine into ember itself. Now that you've seen how interesting this thing can look, because it is a multi-block structure in a single block placement, so you don't want to stand too close. Place it down. There we go, and you can see it is in the world. I just wanted to place it here because it's just going to work for my demonstration. But you don't have to have it actually touching bedrock like the Ancient Codex does state, but that does give you a good idea that it has to be really close to it. Now, with that, you're going to need some extra things, and that is mechanical core. You're probably going to want at least one. You don't have to, but I recommend it. It's just going to make your life a whole lot easier. Item pumps, I recommend at least a couple, and then a bunch of item pipes and some levers, of course. One lever for every item pump that you're going to use. And machine accessors are going to be optional. And you won't actually need your tinker hammer if you're doing things properly here. Now, right here you've got the input and output of an Ember Borer. And this is where you can feasibly put down an item pump and then pipe from there. You can pipe fuel for it into it, and then you can reverse it and pipe fuel out. You'd have to break it and replace the stuff. So I'm not recommending that you do that because it's just going to be a bit, weird. So what I'm recommending is that you put down, at the very least, a mechanical core. Now, with the optional items of the machine accessor, you could feasibly put these on it and extend even further. You see that they actually have little input-output spots on the side as well. But these are more just for a dressing, so you can make it look really cool or pretty as you really want to. Entirely up to you. In this case, if you just want to save materials, then you can do without those, and you can just go with item pumps. And I recommend you have one to pump out and one to pump in. Now let me grab some item pipes here. Going to put an item pipe on the end. Put an item pipe here, and then I'm going to put an item pump on this one. Now I'll show you exactly what I'm doing here once I get myself a couple of chests. Let's grab some chests here. I'm going to put the machine accessors away for now. I shouldn't need any more item pumps or item pipes. I do have my levers, and mechanical core and Ember Borer I'm done with as well. So let's grab some chests. one at either end. So you can see here, wherever there's an item pump, it's pulling from the adjacent inventory. And as this is a pipe, that's not considered an inventory. That is. So this is going to go from here into the item pump, into where it's directed. This is an item pump, so it's going to pull from an adjacent inventory, which is the mechanical core, and will pull out into this inventory. So, hopefully that makes sense. Let's put a couple of levers on here, and then we can start this up. Now, I can put in here any kind of material that usually can be used in a furnace. A bucket of lava might be a bit questionable, but you can use like coal and wood and charcoal and such like that. In this case, I'm just going to grab a bunch of these and put them in there. I've got 64 coal. It can and will store a lot of fuel. So it will actually go in, all get stored inside, but it won't get used until it's actually needed. And you can just leave this running for now, and it will eventually pull out. Now let's turn this on, and it's not going to have anything happen. You see that the blades are not spinning. If I actually flick this lever, then it should accept this coal. There it goes really quickly, and the wheels start spinning, which is really, really awesome. I like the animation. It's very satisfying. There's no sound to it, which is also kind of nice because a lot of the time, a lot of the machines have annoying repetitive noises that get muffled anyway because of muffle blocks or something. But hey, in this case, it's very nice. Very nice. Now, you'd think because this is piping things out, it would pull the fuel out, but it's not. It's designed to pull out ember crystals and ember shards, which are these little guys here, the little orange guys, ember shards and ember crystals. Now, shards are just smaller versions of ember crystals. Basically, it's sort of like saying coal and a block of coal. So that, if that helps any, you'll get ember shards and ember crystals in return. Now, you're more likely going to get a bunch of ember shards and a few ember crystals. Over time, it should increase or decrease, depending, like I said, with this. And if you're not getting anything from that, don't be afraid to grab your little atmospheric gauge and just give it a quick check and see if you're hitting like a low spot at the moment. And if that's not the case, then maybe you've got something hooked up improperly. That's kind of like your double check so that you know if things are working properly. Plus, you should be able to see the wheels. If you have stuff nearby that is blocking the wheels from you seeing them, you might want to just kind of make at least one block visible so that you can actually see them functioning. And then you know that you've got fuel currently being used inside. And of course, at this point, this chest is not being used, but you could always have stuff being pumped into it. And once you've got your ember shards and crystals, you now can move on to refining them into ember, your fuel, and really getting into this mod. And what else can you do besides your chests here? You could actually use bins. Now, if I go over here, Ancient Codex, we actually covered the ember core. And we covered the crystallized ember. We're skipping the ember activator and refinery today. We're going to be covering those in the next part. But the bin, which is a very, very simple item, is basically a one item inventory. Now, the recipe for this one is just some iron, basically just a bunch of iron. But it's really cool because it displays its contents. So if I grab this stuff with an empty hand. You can see I just switched a bunch of stuff out. That was very pathetic of me, but there we go. I had something in my offhand. But if you put, let's say I have a single ember crystal, put that in there, you see it's represented. And if I put an entire stack in, boom, it will put up to 64 of those items inside. You could use it for like ingots or gold or fuel or whatever, and often you can hook it up to inventories. Like you could fill this with coal and pump out of it into this, or you could pump out of this into two different inventories, one for ember crystals or shards. You can make it very immersive. So that's pretty much what that is intended for in this case. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I look forward to doing part 2 of this so that you guys can see all about how to refine your ember crystals and shards into ember and use that for everything in this mod. So if you have enjoyed this video, please be sure to give a like, comment, subscribe, and as always, don't be afraid to spread the mischief to others if you think they'll enjoy this mischief too. Until the next time, folks, I'll see ya.